Hello, my name is Zakia Daw, and this is my strategies presentation. I chose to do my strategies project over Social Studies Unit 1, Ancient Mesopotamia. I am in a sixth grade classroom. I have 17 students, 10 girls, and 7 boys, and this unit was 36 days long. These state standards help me guide my lessons for the unit. They were compare and contrast the roles and rights of individuals in ancient civilizations to those in the United States today, summarize how early humans utilized and adapted to their physical environment, investigate the roles, responsibilities, and rights of citizens, and analyze the impact of historical events in the world using symbols, maps, and artifacts. For example, Hammurabi's Code. Papillion La Vista Community Schools has priority objectives. These are objectives that they want students to be able to show at the end of the unit in their summative assessments, like their CSAs or CFAs. These were analyze the impact of people, events, and ideas, including various cultures and ethnic groups on the world, and compare and contrast the roles and rights of individuals in ancient civilizations to those in the United States today. For instruction that supported content, I used the gradual release model every lesson. During the anticipatory set, I got students excited to learn and engaged in the lesson. During the I do and we do part of the lesson, we were building understanding. During the you do together, students were able to do partner work. And then on the you do alone, this was where I checked for students' understanding and allowed them to show how they can apply what they learned that day. To support content, I also brought primary sources into my lessons. Students got the chance to analyze artifacts, documents, and photographs to help them develop critical thinking skills as well as an understanding of what things looked like then. So down here in the left, this is an artifact of cuneiform. Cuneiform was the earliest form of writing, and students got the opportunity to see what it looked like. To support content, I also allowed students to have virtual field trips on Google Earth. Students were allowed to explore ancient Mesopotamia land using Google Maps. They also answered questions such as how did the land affect the people? How did it affect their trade? Questions like that. Down here is an example of some of the land that we got to explore. This is present day Lebanon, and it was part of ancient Mesopotamian land. After exploring the land, students were asked various questions and were able to answer those questions based on what they found from Google Earth. For instruction that engaged learners, I also put virtual field trips on here. Students were able to explore the land at their own pace and were also able to ask questions that they wanted to answer. I also engaged learners by cooperative learning. Students worked in small groups, participated in stand up, hand up, pair up discussions, and worked with elbow partners to complete the given task. To engage learners, I allowed them to teach their peers. This was done through presentations. So students researched, then presented about different achievements or inventions that the Mesopotamian people had, and then they taught the class about those achievements or inventions. Down here is an example of that. One student decided to research the wheel. They taught their peers about how it impacted the people, how it impacted the crops, stuff like that. Students were given the opportunity to role play some historical figures that we learned about. They role played Hammurabi. They also got to role play some of the jobs that were there. So, like farming, as well as script writers or scribes. During one lesson students were engaged in, they had the opportunity to simulate Hammurabi. To do this, students were given a scenario labeled the crime, just like this one. It reads, "A man who is accused of robbing a home stands before you. After reviewing the evidence, you find that he is guilty of robbery. What will his punishment be?" After reading the crime, students were able to think about what they would do. They decided if they were going to punish the person or not punish the person. If they were going to punish the person, they were going to simulate Hammurabi and give the punishment. They were able to be maybe as harsh as Hammurabi was, maybe harsher than he was, or maybe not as harsh as he was. Or they could choose to not punish the person at all. If they chose this, they would tell us why. Students were engaged in this lesson because they got choice and they also got to simulate Hammurabi, who was possibly one of the harshest rulers of the ancient Mesopotamian time. During this lesson, students were also able to get up and move and find more crimes around the room that they would make their verdict on. The bar graph above illustrates my students' performance on the pre-test of ancient Mesopotamia. At Papillion La Vista Community Schools, students are graded on level 1, 2, 3, or 4. If a student gets a level 1 on something, that means that they do not have a lot of knowledge, little to no understanding of that concept. If they score 2, that means that they are progressing. If they score a level 3, that means they are proficient. And if they score a level 4, that means that they are advanced. To achieve proficiency or a level 3, students needed to answer at least 10 out of the 13 questions correctly. Based on the results of the pre-test, out of 17 students, none of them scored efficient. To score progressing, which is a level 2, students needed to score at least a 6 out of 13. According to the data from the pretest, 8 out of 17 students scored progressing. This means that from the pretest, 9 out of 17 students scored a 1, which means little to no understanding. As we can see here, the average points out of 17 students was 5.41 out of 13 points. The median was 5.5 out of 13 points, and the range was 3 to 8 points. To score advanced on the pretest, students needed to get a 13 out of 13. This shows that students can demonstrate inferences and applications that go beyond what was taught. From the pretest data, I gathered that I needed to go over how the sea helped the Phoenician and the Phoenician land prosper, as well as what they had to trade and where that came from. As you can see here, one of the questions was name 2 items the Phoenicians exchanged. The answers to this question that I got on the pretest were animals, sculptures, fish, food, sand, and seashells. On this question, 0 out of 34 points were scored. It is out of 34 because this question was worth 2 points. On the post-test performance, we can see a big jump from the pre-test to the post-test. After instruction, the same test was given. Students showed major growth from the pre-test to the post-test. 10 out of 17 students scored advanced, and 7 out of 17 students scored proficient. Looking at the same question, name 2 items the Phoenicians exchanged from the pre-test to the post-test. 32 out of 34 possible points were scored by 17 students. That showed major growth from the pretest to the post-test. So from the pretest, as I said, 0 out of 17 scored proficient, 8 out of 17 scored progressing, and 9 out of 17 scored beginning. After this was taken, I noted frequently missed questions. These were questions that got a 7 out of 17 or lower. This assessment determined my pacing for new lessons. For example, I spent one whole day on how they mapped the stars. Mapping the stars was a hard concept for students to get because this was used to map, to follow the trade route. I also brought in a virtual field trip to the Phoenician land to show how close they were to the sea. This allowed students to generate ideas of how they traded as well as what they traded. In the end, I administered a post-test. This assessed for their overall knowledge of the lesson. 10 out of 17 scored advanced and 7 out of 17 scored proficient. For my research-supported strategy, I chose to do it over role-playing and simulations, with an emphasis on simulations. These strategies help students gain a better understanding of events, motives, actions of others, and decision-making. Students were able to participate as a character whose actions affected the outcome of what will happen at the end of the activity. This strategy was student-centered and problem-based, helping them gain a deeper understanding of what was happening and why it was happening. To implement this, I first modeled with a lot of think alouds. An example of a think aloud I used was this: I am choosing not to punish this person because I didn't think it was a punishable crime. I used simulations to simulate Hammurabi's code. Students were given a crime scenario, and then they simulated Hammurabi and made their own rules and punishments for the crime. They then got to discuss their rules and punishments with their group members. After their discussion, they were then given the punishment that Hammurabi gave. They decided if they were going to agree with Hammurabi's punishment or disagree with it, and then they explained why they agreed or why they disagreed. Part 4 was comparing similarities and differences. So they compared laws then versus the laws now, and the laws that they would make versus Hammurabi's laws that they learned about. In the end, the students were engaged, laughing, having fun, and were able to gain a better understanding of decision making and why or how Hammurabi made these decisions. For technology supported instruction, I chose just a few. The first one I chose was a computer and a projector. These helped me immensely. I used my computer to make slides and display student worksheets. I was also able to show videos to engage learners during anticipatory sets. I was able to project timers on the screen to keep students on task and on time. And directions were displayed at all times during independent work time. Down here is an example of it. This is an example of independent work time. Their task was to research and answer in complete sentences questions 3 through 10. Here's my timer of 30 minutes. Here are the materials needed, which were their Chromebooks, their pencil, and then their paper. And then I also had a task for early finishers if I had any. So early finishers' task was to grab another worksheet about a topic you would like to learn more about. I used Google Classroom a lot during my lessons. For Google Classroom, I was able to assign assignments. This was used to also differentiate for some of my students who had different needs. I know that one student in my class has a 504 where they're supposed to type their answers, so I put everything onto Google Classroom for them. Google Classroom is where I also assigned the virtual field trip and the questions that students were answering using the virtual field trip. On Google Classroom, I was also able to leave feedback for students on their presentations and their work. So here's an example of that. This was over their presentation of an achievement in ancient Mesopotamia. I said, "Great job. I really liked the colors of your infographic as well as the pictures you added. They really emphasized what your topic was about. I also thought the information you had was great. Good job." And then up here is just a couple of examples of the stuff that I assigned. So I assigned Ancient Mesopotamia slideshow, a post-assessment, the field trip, and a pre-assessment. For assessment that measured learners' progress, I use exit tickets at the end of my lessons each day. This showed me what the students learned as well as how they applied it. I also used quizzes and polls. This was given at the beginning of a lesson sequence in the unit to assess what students already knew, and then it was also given at the end of the lesson sequence. I administered the same quiz to students to show their learning and growth throughout the lesson. Students also had a social studies packet that they turned in each week. During the lessons, we filled out various worksheets through this packet. When they would hand it in to me, I would look at it and grade it. This showed me where they were in their learning, as well as if I needed to go back and cover any other topics. Their CSAs, or common summative assessments, were used at the end of the unit. This was a research project about ancient Mesopotamia, where they shared about social class inventions, land, and civilizations that were there. Throughout the unit, I also made many social studies worksheets. Right here is an example of one. For this worksheet, students were given a school AI code and were able to have like conversations within a historical figure. They had to answer these questions as well as create their own questions that they wanted to ask the historical figure. Right here is an example of the quizzes and polls that we had at the beginning of the unit and at the end of the unit lesson. For assessment that monitored and engaged learners, I used lots of turn and talks. While students were turning and talking to their partners, I was able to walk around the classroom and listen in to their conversations. This gave me an idea of who understood it and maybe who didn't understand it as well. Choral responses. I prompted the entire class to respond aloud to simple questions about ancient Mesopotamia. This created a collective answer. This also allowed me to assess the class comprehension and identify if we were ready to move forward in the lesson or not. I used lots of questioning each day to get my students' critical thinking skills going. I also used presentations. Students were able to research achievements and inventions of ancient Mesopotamia and made an infographic on Canva. They then presented their knowledge on the topic that they researched. This was really engaging for them because they were able to pick their topic and pick a way to present it. While students were giving their presentations of ancient Mesopotamian achievements and inventions, their classmates were also assessing their work. The audience was tasked with finding two things the students did well in their presentation and one thing that they could improve on. In the end, I collected the peer assessments and gave them to the person who was presenting to read them over and take notes on what they could do better for their next presentation. Down here are a few examples of our peer assessment or glows and grows. So, one person was presenting and another person was assessing their presentation in their infographic. So, this person said, I love the color combo. It looks very old timey. And their grow was to make the text bigger. This one said that it was a really good slogan. It was super organized, and their grow was to maybe read a bit slower as they were presenting. This one said awesome animations, nice slogan, and their grow was that she would not pause so much when presenting. I also used classroom observations to monitor my students' learning. Classroom observations allowed me to see who maybe needed help a little bit more than someone else did. My research supported strategy was peer assessment. Peer assessments keep learners engaged as well as the student who is teaching accountable. Peer assessment refers to the process of learners grading and providing comments on peer work according to the criteria specified by teachers. Peer assessment is used to help improve the learning of students. One way I used peer assessment in the classroom is allowing peers to give scores to the student or students who were teaching them. Some teachers allow peers to also write glows and grows for positive things they did well and things that they could improve upon. And the glows and grows is what I did for this strategy. This helped keep learners engaged as well as the student who is teaching accountable for their work. They used this to improve the learning of students. To implement this, I first made an anchor chart with sentence stems that students could use. Here is an example of that. Glows focus on positive feedback and strengths, and a sentence starter for that was the best part of your work was. And then grows focus on providing kind and constructive suggestions for improvement. A sentence starter for that would be one suggestion would be students taught or presented about inventions and achievements of the Mesopotamian people, and the learners wrote two glows, and one grow for that. After the first few presentations, I modeled a grow I put on my sheet. This could have been, oh, I really liked the way she organized her presentation. In the end, glows and grows papers were given back to the student to take notes on what they could improve upon for their next presentation. For technology to monitor student learning, I use Google Spreadsheets to track and graph the scores. I tracked and graphed exit tickets, worksheets, pre and post assessments. I also kept notes of students' progress on here as well. This is one example. The blue is the pretest and the red is the post-test. To communicate results, I emailed or released the grades through Google Classroom. When I did this, parents and students were able to see their score. During class time, I also showed the graph of growth to students and praised them for their growth. To share results with my team, I shared the Google spreadsheets with my mentor teacher and our team. This allowed us to see students' growth and maybe what we could reteach them. And that is my strategies project over Ancient Mesopotamia, Social Studies, 6th grade. Thank you.